The Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne is a fantasy novel heavily drawing from Norse mythology. It takes place in the mythical land of Vigrio, a place where gods once ruled with ferocity. This book takes place 300 years after the Great Last Battle, where all the gods were slain, leaving the landscape in ruins from their skirmish, and leaving parts of their bones throughout the land. However, evil is lurking and is on the rise, causing monsters and acts of cruelty to pop up around the world. The book follows 3 characters, each on their own quests for vengeance and honor. But little do they know that once again the world shall fall under the shadow of the gods. I'd like to start off by saying this book is an action-packed thrill ride in every sense of the term. There's very little fat on this book. Everything fits in perfectly and nothing is fluff. The chapters in this book are incredibly short, some only lasting a few pages. This allows the pace of the story to maintain its breakneck pace forward. There is always some sort of action happening in each chapter, whether a short one-on-one battle or a large-scale conflict with massive creatures. You always have something to keep your attention. This breakneck speed of the book helps outweigh one of the criticisms I have of the novel, but I'll mention that later. Each chapter is split into a character-specific POV, and here you follow 3 very different perspectives. I think if you are going to do chapters like this, then you better make sure the characters are not only interesting enough to hold their own chapters, but that they are distinct enough to tell apart. Gwynne succeeds in spades on that. Now, everyone's going to have their preference of characters, and therefore have chapters that they like less than others. Varg and Orca were hands down my favorite chapters, while Brekka chapters were not as much. Thankfully, since the chapters are so short, I never had to read much of her before it was on to the next. The action in this book deserves its own section for praise. It's insane how much Gwynne packs in here. This is the first book I've read by him, and if all his action is like this, then you, sir, have gained another loyal reader. I don't think I've read more carnage being thrown at characters than in this book. Everyone, from the human warriors to the monsters, are just meat sacks waiting to explode in bits of cartilage, sinew, bone, and blood. Especially blood. Characters are constantly wiping it from their eyes, their mouths, their hands, their clothes. It's everywhere in this book. The excessive nature of it is both its strength and its weakness, because it makes for an exciting read, but to a point it starts to become a little numbing. The first time a character is drenched in an enemy's blood may be a cool visual, but by the 5th, 6th, 7th time you've read it, it definitely loses its wow factor. That's not to say that the action itself loses steam. Gwynne has a way of describing action that is wholly unique. It's perfectly choreographed with no wasted lines. Skirmishes are over quickly, which makes the fighting a lot more realistic. Gwynne will sometimes add in these sentence fragments describing the action, and it really adds to the fight scenes and building up the suspense. You really can't put the book down during them. The action in this book takes up a large portion of the length, but there are still plenty of great character moments and fantastic world building. I'm not the most well versed in Norse mythology, so reading page after page of umlauts, something suns, and fjords was a little tiring for me, but I got used to it after a while. The mythology Gwynne draws from is epic, for lack of a better term. Everything is on a grand scale. The Norse tradition is very honor-based, and it's the backbone of this book. The traditions Gwynne draws from and weaves into this book are perfectly used, and don't feel out of place. They feel ancient and well-known, yet they are unique. It was neat to get a good look at this old mythology. The characters are also highly likable. They have just the right amount of wit, yet serious in them. We really benefit by getting a large cast of characters with different personalities that mesh well together. These are all warbands after all, and the team dynamic is played up heavily here. There's a real camaraderie, and you end up instantly liking characters. I can already see the potential of some weird fandoms popping up for some characters. You really do end up caring for them, which make a few of the reveals later on in this book all the more worth it. They are handled so well. Throwaway lines by characters that mean so much more to the reader. I was grinning ear to ear at some parts because I saw the mention of a previously introduced character and was not expecting it. It was perfectly executed. You can see when Gwynne is setting up characters to reappear later on, or to have larger character arcs, but it's handled so perfectly that it doesn't lack suspense or surprise. There were a couple gripes I had with the book though. First off, there are some heavy-handed descriptions and moments in here, where exactly how the character is feeling and how it relates to their past is described in detail, no matter how many times we've read about their past. Now, this may just be how Gwynne writes, and it's not even necessarily a bad thing. It's totally personal preference, but there were moments where I know I would have preferred some more subtlety to what the character was feeling. It resulted in a lot of eye rolls for me. Like, I get it, they had a traumatizing past and it impacts their every decision. I don't need to be reminded of that every time. I understand it's what's going through the character's mind. If that's how they felt the first time something happened, then obviously that's what's going through their mind the second time. Another kind of weird thing about this book is how there isn't really a main villain. There's a lot of questing going on in here, and characters going on large detours to finally end up where they need to be for the next book. This is why making the chapters so short and keeping the pace of the book up was such a good thing. The urgency was never lost in the book, even with no big baddie to keep your eyes focused on. Everything was very in the moment, due to the short nature of the chapters, and each chapter having a clear cliffhanger ending. You don't end up missing the fact that there is no clear antagonist present until the end of the book. But that is where I need to say that Gwynne did exactly what he needed to do in this opening of the Bloodsworn trilogy. Everything is now set up perfectly for him to really crack this world wide open, figuratively and literally. I get that there was a lot of groundwork needed to get the ball rolling on this trilogy. Lots of lore, characters, motives, and plot to set up. This book really knocked that out of the park. I am so incredibly excited to read the second entry in the Bloodsworn trilogy, The Hunger of the Gods. Definitely check this book out if you are a fantasy or action adventure fan, and I give it a rating of go to your bookstore now. Stay tuned for my next book review. See ya.